Hello BookTube, I'm Mike and this is Riff Raff's Reading Renaissance, and today I want to do a February reading report back. It's not quite at the end of February yet, but I wanted to get ahead of schedule because I have a small procedure on my eye that needs to be done in hospital this week, and that might affect both my reading and my videoing, so I thought let me do this before the operation, not afterwards. So wish me luck. That's all about making sure I can continue to read as effectively as I have in the past. I did one for January and it went down very well. As you will remember, when I started the year, I talked about what my reading plan was for the year, and I put up this gargantuan spreadsheet that caused quite a stir, but it's actually been a tremendous help to me because it has meant that at all stages, although I can flex it and bring things in, etc., there is a master plan about the serious books that I want to get through this year and don't want to let the year slip away without doing. So, talking of which, of course, as you know, the big thing for January was the Iliad, which we successfully completed. I did a vlog, which seems to have been well received. I'm very grateful. Something like 700 people watched the first one, and even 150 people got to part 4. So that's very gratifying, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Just in passing, before we move off the Iliad, I found in a thrift shop this book called The 5-Minute Iliad and Other Instant Classics, and I couldn't resist, of course, and I just opened it. I wanted to share some of it with you because it's really quite amusing. It starts, it says, ancient Greek civilization flowered around 500 BC, at which point it became classic. Its eventual decline was the result of ouzo and philosophy, which might have survived separately, but taken together proved too much. And then it opens with the famous opening lines of the Iliad as follows. Rage goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles. If you don't know it, I can hum a few bars. Murderous doomed, he cost the Achaeans countless losses, or the Argives, or the Greeks, same difference, hurling down to the house of death so many sturdy souls that they opened an Achilles' wing and gave a discount. Begin, muse, when the two got in each other's faces, Agamemnon, lord of men, and brilliant Achilles. So, and the same book, it covers a whole range of classics. Divine Comedy, Paradise Lost, Sense and Sensibility, Christmas Carol, Moby Dick. It goes on in the same vein. So that's one just to tickle the funny bone, which I couldn't resist in passing, having conquered the serious challenge of reading the Iliad. So that was January. In February, I didn't have, if you remember, my spreadsheet started, the first column was about mega books, and the Iliad was my mega book for January. There wasn't a mega book for February because coming up in March is Wolf Hall, which I'm going to read as part of the March of the Mammoths. Despite what anyone might say about whether it's quite 800 pages, it's certainly big enough for me to consider it a mammoth. So that's in the pipeline. But that's March, so we won't talk about that now. February, therefore, in terms of the mega books, was a little bit of a breather. So if we then look at the medium books, the book I was targeted to read in February was Beloved by Toni Morrison. I've actually started this quite late in my month. When I go through and I'll tell you what else I've read, you'll see why. But at the moment, I'm about halfway through, but there's a good couple of days left, and the reading is simply amazing. Perhaps I won't read from it now because this video will get too long, but this is my first experience of Toni Morrison and her writing, and I'm floored. The absolute flow of words and language to depict not just episodes but feelings and emotions and suppressed emotions and rage. There's a scene in here, I can't resist. There's a scene in here about a chain gang, and they're all working and using their mallets to hit nails into rocks, etc. But the parallel that she draws about that rage smashing down whatever it is they're smashing down. I would read it to you, but I'll save it for another occasion. But suffice it to say, this is already only halfway through. This has been an amazing read that I would strongly, strongly recommend to anyone who hasn't experienced Toni Morrison yet. So that's a good start, and I've got to finish that by the end of February, which I'm sure I will. The next column is called South African Fiction, and of course, as I hope you know, I've got the series going called Read the Beloved Country, and this is where I tackle the literature of my own country, South Africa. In January, we started with Andre Brink's Looking on Darkness, which you can see here. And in February, I was scheduled to read, as I did indeed read, Olive Schreiner's The Story of an African Farm, which you can see here. And this was a deeply rewarding experience. I won't talk about it in length now because, of course, if you're interested, the video is there. There's a detailed analysis of my experience of reading that book and why I think you should read it. Now, for March, I had scheduled to read another book in the series, and I decided to read that in February to slightly reprioritize the list because of this. I knew at the end of February I had this medical intervention coming that might just throw me off track for a little while, and therefore I read Sol Plaatje's Mhudi. This, of course, is the first novel written in English by a black South African, so very important historically, and also a rattling good read, which you can see here. So I'm ahead of schedule in terms of the project of Read the Beloved Country. And if I look across at the schedule, the non-fiction books I'm supposed to be reading is this book called The Deal, which I know I've talked a little bit about before. I'm approximately halfway through. No, that's a bit more than halfway through, I think. But it's fascinating, but maybe only locally. This is the backstory of the political shenanigans that led to the government of national unity that we currently have in South Africa. Probably less internationally of interest, but great interest to me. That book is always there. I carry it around in my bag when I've only got 5 minutes quickly to read, because it's a fact journalistic type of read, and you can absorb it quicker than something as rich and deep as, say, Toni Morrison, which really demands your attention as you go through. I will say the idea that I'm getting used to in this process of multiple reading multiple books at the same time is not something I've done before, and if I'm honest, not something I'm entirely comfortable with yet. I tended to be a bit of a linear reader where I'd start one and push through until it finished. I do think there's merit to this, because another book on my list that I was supposed to be reading for fun is the autobiography of Ben Elton, which I've spoken about before. And I am reading it, but this sits by my bedside, and it's the book I read last thing at night if I have the energy, which often I don't because of the life I lead and the working hours I lead and the reading I've done earlier in the day. And as you can see, my progress in this book is relatively slow. But no harm done. This is an indulgence. It's a sort of a popcorn type of read. It's pure fun. It's very funny. It's lighthearted, and it doesn't make much demand on me. So if it takes me a little while to get through it, and if it goes longer in the schedule than I thought, it really doesn't matter. Then in terms of the original plan for the year, you may remember that I said I was going to tackle short stories, and being realistic, I was not going to plan to read a book of short stories every month. I just know I won't be able to fit it in. But what I thought I'd do, rather than simply not get to any of them, was each month pick an author, pick out one of the many books I have about books of short stories, and read a couple of short stories from that author. So at least I dipped my toe into the author. In January, I did Ishiguro, and February, I was scheduled to read Anton Chekhov. This beautiful, look at that, for a beautiful cover. This is the Wordsworth Classics edition, and no disrespect to Wordsworth, but they're not normally known for their stunning covers, but I do think that's an absolutely beautiful cover. In any event, I have read precisely 2 of the 20 or so short stories that are in this book, but it's been sufficient for me to really feel that I've experienced Anton Chekhov's writing, and indeed I want to read more. I was very tempted to plod straight ahead and read many more, but I'm trying to take seriously the plan of saying I do want to, the 2 priorities I want to give this year are to the mega books, so that, because if you don't prioritize the mega books, you're just never going to get them done. They're never going to fit into a convenient slot. And the other thing, a bit of my passion project, the Read the Beloved Country, where I'm, as I said, a little bit ahead of schedule. So I thought perhaps I might take the Chekhov with me into the hospital in case there's waiting time there, which I'm sure there will be. I might be able to knock off a short story or two there. But I've certainly enjoyed my engagement with Anton Chekhov, and I look forward to reading a lot more of that in the future. Then I had a column called History as opposed to just general non-fiction. And I was watching a video by Revenant Reads, an introductory video to Historathon. Now, I'm sure a lot of you watching this will already know what Historathon is. I'm still a little bit new to BookTube, and it absorbed this idea that there's 4 quarters in the year, and in each quarter you read from a different historical perspective. Quarter 1 is prehistory, and as it happens, there is a book from that period that I very much wanted to read. So I've had a little bit of a rethink about whether, in fact, I might be taking part in Historathon this year. I still got to make it happen in terms of physically reading this stuff, but the idea is there. This book is called First People, The Lost History of the Khoisan, and it's an extremely interesting book. It's written by a guy called Andrew Smith, who is a respected archaeologist. Professor Andrew Smith is an archaeologist and researcher who has studied traditional herders and pastoralists throughout his long and distinguished career. He has excavated widely in Africa, worked for many years with Khoisan descendants in South Africa and Bushmen in Namibia. He is Emeritus Professor of the Department of Archaeology at the University of Cape Town. The reason I really wanted to read this book is it plays to some of the issues that are going to emerge in my Read the Beloved Country project about land issues in this country, because that's obviously a hugely sensitive and important and historic issue. And this book, I presume, will make me better informed about the perennial argument of who was where when and who pushed who out of where. So that's why I want to read this book. And anyway, so I thought, look at me, maybe I'm jumping on the Historathon bandwagon thanks to Revenant Reed's compelling video. I must say it was a lovely video, which I'll link to. So now I just have to find the time in the schedule for the year to read it. But I've got till the end of quarter 1, so I guess that's the end of March. So there's still hope for me yet. The next and last column of the original spreadsheet was books on music that I wanted to read. And the one I identified was this biography on the band Dire Straits, written by their bass guitarist John Ilsley. I have to say, this I have not started. So in amongst all the reading that I'm showing you and the part reading that I'm showing you, this is a less successful story. I did decide that if there was a book I didn't get to in time in the schedule, this might be the one, because it's just another one of these indulgent fun reads for me. It's not likely to shape very much in terms of my true reading experience and the Renaissance journey I'm trying to achieve. So that's sort of where we got to. Not bad. As you'll be aware, I'm back at work, so the pressure is on, and the available time to read books is substantially reduced from the wonderful period when I was on leave. So my immediate priority is to finish Beloved, which I'm sure I will this week because it's absolutely compelling. And as I say, I will be a little bit of downtime towards the back of the end of the week. So if you don't see videos from me for a little bit, please don't panic. I'm fine. I'll just be recuperating. The priority will be checking that the eye can read. And only once I'm happy that the eye, A, can read and B, is presentable, then I might pop back up again on a video to talk a little bit more about the project. But before I leave you, and because you may not see me very quickly again in a week or so, I thought I would also share some of the other books, quite apart from the planned schedule, that have tumbled into my life in the last couple of weeks, because there's quite a few of them, some of which I'm very excited about. The first one I want to talk about is this book, which is called The Literary Guide to the Bible. Now, I have for a long time, I'm not a person of faith, but I am very aware that whatever book you read on the Western canon, the first thing everybody says is that the Bible itself is the most important work of literature in the English language. Now, also, I was raised originally as a Catholic, So I had a lot of exposure to the Bible. Those who are Catholics will know that the way the Catholic Church works is there are 3-year cycles, cycle A, cycle B, and cycle C. And the Bible is broken up into these 3 cycles and read to the congregation every Sunday from the pulpit. So if you have been a Catholic as long as I was, from the age of birth to the end of, say, my school career, which is about, let's say 12 years, you've had the Bible read to you at least 4 times. Cycle A, B, and C takes 3 years to get through it. And if you've done 12 years of time, then you've heard it 3 times. It's a bit like the audiobook debate. Have I read the Bible? I'm not sure about that, but I've certainly had someone read it to me over and over again. And I have to say, whenever I hear people like Steve Donahue's doing this wonderful series of reading the book of Genesis, it's extremely familiar. I find there are no Bible stories that anybody quotes to me that I don't know intrinsically from that experience. But as I say, today I look at the Bible as purely a work of literature, and therefore, frankly, a work of fiction. And this book is one of the first I've found where it is looking at the Bible book by book. It literally takes each book of the Bible and it explains the literary history, the literary relevance, and the literary richness of the Bible as a work of literature from a secular point of view, by people who have studied the Bible history, but not from a faith or liturgical point of view. And that's exactly the right spot for me. Great respect for everybody else. It's a free world, but that's what I've been looking for. And I finally found it in this book. So I'm quite excited to have received this book. And I've read the Genesis chapter to try and keep up with Steve's wonderful reading. And I don't know whether Steve plans to carry on through the whole Bible, but if he does, I'm well armed now with a literary guide to help me understand the richness of what is undoubtedly the greatest work of literature in the history of literature. So that's a book I'm very excited to have found. Another one, and here you guys may guide me because I'm sure you know more about this than me, but along the way I've heard people talk about The Anatomy of Criticism by Northrop Frye as a bit of a go-to work on trying to understand literature and trying to analyze literature. And wherever I've seen this before, it's been massively expensive and totally prohibitive. But I did find it in one of these famous thrift shops at a very reasonable price, so I picked that up as well, and I'm excited to have done that. These trips to the thrift shops are in some ways dangerous and in some ways productive. You just never know what you're going to find. Talking of which, I've read the Iliad, but of course the Odyssey is still on the horizon. Maybe that's for next year. But what I discovered again in one of these thrift shops is this book called The Odyssey of Homer by Richard Whittaker. And the thing that makes this jump out and makes me bring it home is it's actually called a Southern African translation. And when I saw that, I thought, I can't resist this. I need to understand what this is. I mean, I've heard Steve talk about many, many, many translations of both the Iliad and the Odyssey, but I wonder if he's seen this, the translation, a Southern African translation by Richard Whittaker. That's all I've done. I haven't explored it further, but it jumped out at me and I couldn't resist. When I flick through it, I believe there is reference to things like assegais, which is a very South African term for a spear. So we'll see. It might be a very interesting experience. But it's certainly going in the pile of the couple of versions I've got of the Odyssey, which is still on my big books to read, but not part of 2026. So that I was very excited to bring that home and find that with me. Another one, this is totally out of the blue. Somebody the other day mentioned, I forget where I heard this, but people have been talking about Stefan Zweig, and it's a strange spelling, but there, Stefan Zweig, and particularly the book Chess. Now, I know that Stephen Fry, for example, cites Stefan Zweig's Beware of Pity, I think it's called, as one of his favorite novels of all time. And certainly I've heard people talk very seriously about how both his fiction and non-fiction are really worth seeking out. And somebody recently specifically talked about chess, and I thought, oh, that's quite nice. And I went online to have a look, and all the new copies were horrendously expensive. And then the strangest thing happened. I belong to a local quiz group, and I went along to our almost weekly quiz that we have. And this week there was something different. There was a wonderful guy there who had boxes of books, and he was saying, look, he's downsizing and he's doing various changes, and all of these books must go, so please help yourself. I was like a kid in a candy store. I got quite a lot because literally he refused to take any money for them. He simply wanted them to go to a good home, which I could assure him, if you look behind me, that they're in good company here. And then I stumbled amongst them on this copy of Stefan Zweig's Chess. Now, what I did not know is it's a tiny little book. I mean, if I hold it next to my hand, you will see it really is a tiny little book, and it's only 82 pages long. So this is going to, maybe this should come with me to the hospital. I could virtually put it in my pocket. But I was very excited. The premise of the book, by the way, is that a group of passengers on a cruise ship challenge the world chess champion to a match. At first they crumble until they are helped by whispered advice from a stranger in the crowd, a man who will risk everything to win. Zweig's acclaimed novella Chess is a disturbing, interesting, dramatic depiction of obsession and the price of genius. Doesn't that sound wonderful? Anyway, so that was a complete out-of-the-blue benefit. I also found a copy of Anthony Burgess's book on D.H. Lawrence, called Flame into Being, the life and work of D.H. Lawrence. I've already got Anthony Burgess's work on James Joyce, because I read Anthony Burgess's book on Shakespeare, the novel Nothing Like the Sun, and I was completely blown away. I was just floored. I have now, in fact, as I've said before on this channel, I've become a complete fanboy for Anthony Burgess. This is the D.H. Lawrence book, which I was very excited to find. But further than that, I'm now actively looking in the thrift shops to accumulate anything I can find by Burgess, because I want to read them. And I won't bore you with too much detail, but you can see here I have I've been quite successful. I've found Anthony Burgess's The Kingdom of the Wicked, which is part of his biblical stories. I think it's not the first one, so I may hold off that until I've got them in the right order. Burgess's 1985, which was his response to Orwell's 1984. That sounds to me something like might be fun to read. This novel called MF, and I will let you work out what MF stands for. I'm not going to get myself into trouble on BookTube. There's this one called The Right to an Answer, which I understand is a legal one, I think. I do already have some Burgess, but these are the ones that I've found recently. The one called The Piano Players. And then this one, which is called The Eve of Saint Venus. So if you know any of these novels, if you've read them, please give me a comment below about which ones you liked or didn't like, and don't be subtle. Tell me if you think any of them are rubbish. I know Steve has mentioned that Burgess did sometimes phone it in, but in Steve's own words, even his phoned in versions were still better than everybody else. So, but I am unabashedly, I think, a bit of a fanboy now for Burgess, and these books are so cheap at the place that I get them that they literally jump into the basket. Another one I found in the same place was this biography of, in fact, it's an autobiography of Andre Brink, called A Fork in the Road. You can see a lovely picture of him there with an eland or a springbok, or someone other than me will know better than me what that is, but it's certainly the hinterland of South Africa. And if you look on the back, there's a very typical Afrikaans family from the time. The reason I'm interested in Brink is, of course, that the first book in my Read the Beloved Country series was his book, Looking on Darkness, which was the first Afrikaans book to be banned, and is a simply fantastic read. It's the first Brink that I've read, and it's not going to be the last, because I'm so enthusiastic now. I want to read his biography and understand a bit more about the making of the man, because what a fantastic writer. I was completely blown away. Talking of fantastic writers, the charity shop also offered up Anthony Beevor's The Second World War. I know those of you who know history will know that if Anthony Beevor is good at writing about just about anything. I have Stalingrad and I think I have D-Day, but I don't have this one, which is the whole of the Second World War. So I couldn't resist. That came with me too. These prices are so low and so reasonable, and such a good cause. Of course, it's a hospice that we're supporting, that you can't go wrong. The other book that arrived in my journey is this one called Beginning Theory, and this one is one of these BookTube made me do it books. This book I'm going to blame on Bren Booth Jones. Bren did a fantastic video about not studying formally English literature, but simply doing it yourself, which I thought was a wonderful video for people like me who, you know, at this stage of life are never going to be able to study it formally, but are genuinely interested to understand the process better as we dive more and more into the literature that's available. It does help. And he recommended very strongly this book called Beginning Theory by Peter Barry as a very useful and accessible guide into the rather murky and daunting world of literary understanding and criticism. So that's a huge pile of books for my February report back, some of which I've actually read. But anyway, I just wanted to bring you up to speed with what had happened to me book-wise in the last month since I did the last report. And as I said before, I may be a little bit low in productivity in the next week and a half. Bear with me, don't worry about it. It's nothing terribly dramatic. It's just one of those things one needs to do when you're not as young as you used to be. And with a bit of luck, I will see you quite soon, bouncing back for the next chapter of the Reading Renaissance journey. So thanks very much, and I hope you're all well, hope you're all reading. Those with extreme weather, I hope you're hunkering down with great books and locking the doors and keeping cold weather outside. We've got hot weather in Durban, but we always do, so that's no different from usual. Anyway, let me sign off now. Thanks for watching this video, and bye-bye now.